Trump's speech and Iran's ferocious response. Trump declared in his speech that there will be at least 2 to 4 more weeks of fighting. The markets are going crazy right now. But one of the stark things that I found to be very surprising was when Trump was saying that missiles are done, its navy is done, its army is finished. Iran launched one of its biggest missile strikes on Israel and the rest of the Gulf region overnight. So here is just one report from Fox News about the time of Trump's speech. Israel is being pounded by Iran, sirens sounding over Tel Aviv as a barrage of missiles hit the nation. Israel in general and Tel Aviv in particular has been under almost constant bombardment throughout the day. One of the most intense bombardments, in fact, since the very early days of this war. Interceptors were launched at those missiles which came in one after another. In Israel, there was a major sewage disaster that was caused by these missile strikes. So his speech was flip flopping by the hour. It was only a couple of days ago we had this 15-point peace proposal, and that just sort of slipped off the news cycle, and then some another announcement is made. One expects that when the president makes a speech, there will be something of substance that he's going to share with the American people, some kind of major policy declaration. But he did not say anything that we had not heard 100 times before in the usual waffling manner. You know, this was the most incoherent speech. His addresses are getting increasingly incoherent. It's very hard to follow his line of thinking if there is any line of thinking at all to follow. Trump is completely lost in his delusional world. He could go back to his recollection of history that is quite amazing. That he says that the United States was in the Vietnam War for 19 years. So I just went to Wikipedia because that is probably where they got their numbers from. And if I'm not mistaken, the US official involvement or combat operations in Vietnam began in 1964. Hostilities ended with the Paris Accords March 29, 1973. It was, by my estimation, about 9 years. President said, stop complaining about this war. World War One and World War Two, Korea War, Vietnam War, were much longer. This has only been days. So he's almost browbeating the American public. That is kind of a joke, really, at this point. I mean, it does not really warrant any response to the speech that he gave. And also, he said that Iran is the number one state sponsor of terror. This is a complete lie. This is straight out of the Israeli lobby talking points. It's repeated ad nauseum by every US politician and media outlet. It is simply not true. He said that Iran has killed the American soldiers in the Beirut Marine barracks bombing in 1983. Ostensibly, that is assuming that Hezbollah did that. Hezbollah had not announced a formal organization, did not have a manifesto until 1985. Okay, the context is important. Israel was occupying South Lebanon, and the US was militarily occupying Lebanon. US naval destroyers were shelling targets in Lebanon at that time. So those were Lebanese resistance factions, whatever name you give them. And the other one is IED roadside bombs in Iraq. Iran is slaughtering our soldiers. Trump said, no, those were Iraqi resistance fighters. Mind you, some of the Shiite resistance fighters were armed and trained by the United States military. Okay, so these were not Iranians, and America did illegally invade and occupy Iraq. So our soldiers were there illegally under fake justification of weapons of mass destruction. And then he has his own weapons of mass destruction fraud, which is that Iran was an imminent threat, weeks away from a nuclear weapon. Every single bit of Trump's case of why Iran is evil. No, Israel is the number one state sponsor of terror on the planet, not Iran. Iran was fighting US terrorists. Qasem Soleimani was fighting US terrorists. Hezbollah was fighting terrorists that US armed, that US backed in Syria, in Iraq. Okay, that is a fact. So he lies that the US rests its imperial narratives on are just breathtaking. And very few people, especially in US media, call them out. They did not refute any of the lies, practically, that the president said. So there is the US mainstream media. President of Iran releasing a letter just giving the facts, a lot of the facts about the root causes of this war. Nonetheless, Iran has responded in a big way. It does not seem like it is militarily defeated one bit. Despite the fact that the US and Israel, especially Trump, is saying this is going to be over in 2 to 4 weeks. Iranian spokesperson responded to the speech that gave me a broader tapestry. What did I find? The best diplomat in the world right now, under these stressful circumstances, is Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, talking at great length on Arab English channel, even though he decided to speak in Farsi. I listened to the man destroy Trump, destroy Steve Witkoff, destroy Jared Kushner, destroy Netanyahu. Not with bombs, not with bullets, bayonets, none of that. He destroyed them with words. Words that rang true, words that were resolute, words that said that what was happening right now, words that said Witkoff has not talked to a single Iranian, period. Now go back and look at the cabinet meeting where Witkoff is, in his sycophancy, is trying to impress Trump as much as possible and telling him about all the things that they did and that they came to fruition. Well, they came to no fruition basically because he did not talk to a single solitary Iranian. He talked to Pakistanis, he talked to Omanis and others who were offering their good offices and maybe a third or fourth level intermediary. He never talked to any Iranians, and Arakchi simply just blew him out of the water on that, and of course, consequently, jumped out of the water on that. Then the second thing he implied that they had delivered telephonically, by letter, by email, their conditions for this war cessation, and they are straightforward, they are very understandable, especially about US fault in all of this, and they are clear. Israel and US have to stop, full stop. They have to stop. And maybe there are some other things like reparations, even. They went well beyond the 5 point plan articulated by the Chinese and the Pakistanis a few days ago. He is very adamant about it, and I think he is being straightforward. He is being a diplomat. He is being honest. And he's telling the world and Trump they're not going to stop until the last Iranian is dead or these conditions are met. Take that, Trump. I will tell about something that happened surrounding this speech. In terms of Iran's military, firing multiple waves of missiles. Of course, we have the missiles fired at Israel, Gulf states, Amazon data center in Bahrain, which Iran claims has been destroyed. In more than 150 missiles and rockets were fired from Hezbollah. Here is what Iran is doing in response to this speech. Whereas Trump is gloating about the bombing of a very important bridge that was just about to be completed, called the V1 bridge. And here he is gloating about it. The biggest bridge in Iran comes tumbling down, never to be used again. It is time for it to make a deal, Iran to make a deal before it is too late. There you have the contrast. Well, on the Iranian side, another barrage hitting Israel. I mean, that just kind of speaks to the ridiculousness of the claims from the president. But what is more? telling is the fact that Iran timed that missile barrage right at the end of Trump's national address, which was, in a way, the Iranians are very sophisticated in their ability to troll the US and the West, not just in the social media, but also on the battlefield. So they're making a real statement there. And I think that was devastating for people in Israel. Where is Netanyahu amongst all these barrages? He seems to be missing out of the scene. You know, where exactly is he? What is the true political situation in Israel? So on the bridge, I mean that the suspension bridge is the only one of its kind in the region. It is not a military bridge. That is a civilian bridge. It is probably going to create a lot of disruptions in terms of people's movement. There is a reason they built a bridge over that sort of terrain, obviously, like any other place in the world. But it is just kind of arrogant attitude by the US president and the administration, saying that they are just going to wreck Iranian society. They said it out in the open, and they said we are going to make this country unable to function as a country. And they are justifying this by claiming that Iran is the world's number one state sponsor of terror, Iran being the worst antagonist in this story. I mean, that is how they package it, that is how they justify it. You know, anybody pushing back or resisting Israel in the region is labeled as terrorist. And I'm telling you right now, this is the biggest problem in the international system. Now, this label has been abused. It is an arbitrary definition. It is practically meaningless at this point. It is used to justify the worst war crimes of the modern era. It is being used to justify ethnic cleansing in not just Gaza, but also in South Lebanon. Whole villages have been razed to the ground. Towns have been razed this week in South Lebanon, and Israel is openly calling for the forced ethnic cleansing and the threat of death. That is exactly the same deal that they were giving Palestinians in Gaza. But it is justified because they are claiming that these are terrorist targets in South Lebanon, claiming Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. We are well into a third world war if this continues at this rate in the Persian Gulf, all based on this terrorist label. I might add, Hexeth tweeted out, he said, back to the Stone Age, this is you as self styled Secretary of War. Mind you, everything inside Iran will be rebuilt. They just bombed the pharmaceutical manufacturers just in the last 24 hours inside Iran. Why are they doing this? So there are no more military targets per se. So now it's all just civilian industry and just punishing them. Iran is earning more from oil sales each day than it did before the US and Israeli bombs started falling at the end of February this year. It may be pummeled on the battlefield, but it is winning the energy war. And mainstream sources are admitting that Iran is going to have revenue to be able to rebuild. Problem seems to be on the US side, where there is a lot being lost and drained economically and militarily. The US is deepening its inability to end this conflict because one of the things that Iran foreign minister said, including reparations, US is going to have to pay for all the destruction it has done, particularly to those targets that are not war targets, that are war crimes. You are going to have to pay to rebuild them. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that US would do that, but I'm saying it is making its ability to end this conflict very difficult. Here is a president who says we get all our own oil not through Hormuz, the state of which is creating a lot of problems at this stage of war, but mostly the world gets it from the Persian Basin. You were talking about the state of Hormuz not being critical to the United States. Closure is destabilizing the global economy, and destabilization in the global economy will hurt regular Americans also because of the integration of US economy in the world's economy. Trump will lose the working class. He will lose the independents. He loses the anti war voters because of inflation. His base is Wall Street, big oil and gas companies, big AI. Yeah, the Israeli lobby. That is Trump's base. That's it. There is nothing left. Anyone will be stupid enough to be on the mega train at this point, looking for a $1.5 trillion defense budget. Trump is proposing deep cuts to all other programs to fund military expansion, setting up a major budget battle for the midterms. It is already looking quite bad for Trump and the Republican Party, given that the war in Iran has absolutely zero, or at least has very low popularity. Thank you very much for patient hearing and supporting this independent source of information and analysis. Please subscribe if you have not done